you recently wrote that your metabolism probably isn't broken. You may not be training as hard as you think, right? You might be inaccurate in tracking your food and also inaccurate with your activities. There's this magical narrative out there that the problem is not that you're not actually in a deficit. The problem is that your metabolism is broken, especially for the midlife woman. So let's talk about that.
We have research in thousands of men and women, even through the menopause transition. What a lot of these people that are pushing this your metabolism is broken narrative don't take into account is a lot of people feel like if the title of a study doesn't say menopause, then it's somehow not related to menopause or not, worthwhile for women in menopause to take to pay attention to. And we have some really great research looking at the entire life course from ages 18 to 80 and identifying metabolisms. And what they found was across the age of 20 to about 63, we don't see any changes in resting metabolic rate.
All right. Is cortisol stopping your fat loss, or are we blaming the wrong thing? Dr. Allan Bacon is back on Stronger by Design, and he doesn't really need an introduction, but I'm going to introduce him anyways. He is a nutrition and fitness coach. He's going to educate us, and he also does research, right? So he's known for cutting through misinformation without removing the nuance. So, like all my favorite scientists, you're going to hear a lot of it depends. What's the context? Maybe, right? Very conditional, not this absolutist black and white stuff. And today we're going to tackle, I think, one of the most persistent beliefs in women's fitness. I feel like it's running the gamut through socials again, that cortisol, hormones, or a damaged metabolism can somehow magically override the fundamentals of fat loss. So let's dive right in. Cortisol and fat loss, hit us with your knowledge, Allan. Women are being told that that stress and cortisol are the reasons they cannot lose weight. What is cortisol actually doing in the body?
The problem with this topic, and one of the things that we find no matter what we talk about, is there's a kernel of truth in all of this. And that's why this becomes such a confusing and such a contentious topic. Yes, chronic high cortisol in the presence of a calorie surplus can increase fat deposition. You can build more fat, you will store more fat, build less muscle under those conditions. The
Say that
problem
again. What conditions?
under a calorie surplus, particularly if you're not weight training, you're going to store more fat. And,
So
when we start
cortisol in the presence of
a calorie surplus.
calorie surplus.
Now, the problem is we are taking that information and then we are using it to branch out to all forms of cortisol spikes. And cortisol spikes themselves aren't necessarily a bad thing. In fact, they are a necessary function of the body. If you want to get the best health, performance, physique, it is something that we want working within our biology. I mean, cortisol spikes during exercise. This is a function, not a bug in the system. Exercise is a physical stressor that requires an energy surge. Cortisol is the body's natural stress hormone, and its release increases during physical activity to mobilize stored energy sources. And one of the things that you had mentioned in the preamble up to this was you wanted people to really understand that cortisol is used to take advantage of glucose and fatty acids, making them available for your muscles to fuel your workout.
How does it do that?
Well, it's a temporary normal spike of the body's adaptation to exercise, but it does it through a couple different releasing of hormones. I'm going to get to that in 1 second. I just want to touch on something else first. This spike, it doesn't matter whether it's large or small, because some people will take things and be like, well, look at how big these spikes are from the research because of exercise. That's okay. It will spike more when we're doing things that have a larger demand on the body, but it helps with the repair, recovery, and improved performance that we're looking for in our workouts anyways. And the biggest fear mongering that I've seen done in this space surrounding cortisol is with women and cardiovascular type exercise. But what's really funny about it is you will see people Fear-monger, completely different things. Some people will say, well, you can't do high intensity exercise because it'll spike cortisol. Other people will say, well, you can't do zone 2 cardio because it will spike cortisol. And if we're looking to lose body fat, it doesn't seem to matter anyways. That preamble that we talked about, that, hey, if you're in that calorie surplus, you could potentially store more with chronically elevated, not these short spikes from exercise, with chronically elevated, it can cause some problems. Yes, that's true. But in the presence of a calorie deficit, cortisol doesn't have anything to store away. If you have no bricks to build a house from, you don't build that house. And so in the presence of a calorie deficit, it doesn't matter what cortisol is doing. It doesn't matter what insulin's doing. It doesn't matter what any of these fear-mongering hormones are doing, because that energy deficit takes precedent and your body has to get energy from somewhere. So what does it do? Well, it liberates energy from muscle glucose. It liberates energy from adipose tissue. That's how we get that fat burn going. And it's a really beneficial thing. And technically speaking, cortisol is both a fat storing and a fat burning hormone. And this is where we talk about a little bit of the mechanism that comes into play here, which is what I wanted to give a little bit of an overview first. But it's both because it increases the activity of two enzymes in the body. One is lipoprotein lipase, the body's major fat storing enzyme, but it also increases the activity of hormone sensitive lipase, which is the body's chief fat releasing enzyme. And I love when we have people that are fear-mongering these things and they're saying, hey, buy my cortisol supplement or buy my cortisol program or whatever they're trying to sell. And we're
Mushroom tea, I think.
mushroom tea. Yeah. That's one of the ones that's been coming up recently, and they'll mention, hey, look at this lipoprotein lipase. You got to really be scared of this, and they'll completely ignore the other side of the equation. Now, if we, as people that want you to not be scared of cortisol, pulled the same thing and we're like, hey, look, cortisol releases hormone sensitive lipase, we could make the argument of you want cortisol to be as high as possible all the time. And that would make sense if we showed you the evidence of just hormone sensitive lipase, instead of telling you the entire topic about how it's a balance. And under certain situations, it makes sense to have it as a fat releasing benefit. In other senses, it could be a fat deposition problem. Growth hormone, catecholamines are all higher during exercise and calorie deficits. These accentuate cortisol's fat burning potential while suppressing its fat storing potential. So under these conditions, cortisol is technically a good thing. And there's no reason to fear these releases from exercise, really, in any context, because even when we look at things like zone 2 cardio, which is often feared, yes, zone 2 cardio will cause a rise in cortisol. And what they will do if they're trying to convince you that this is a problem is they'll say, okay, well, look at this study. It shows the release of cortisol. It shows how high it goes from zone 2 cardio. And then look at 2 hours later, it's still elevated. This is a really big problem because long-term cortisol is a big problem. 2 hours is not long-term. But they will show you 2 hours and they will legitimately show you these graphs of cortisol and they'll say, look at this elevation at 2 hours. The conversation stops there. If we bring that out farther, all of a sudden that cortisol starts to drop. And by 6 hours and for the rest of the day, it's lower than it was prior to you having exercise. So if we really want to be technical about it, zone 2 cardio, which is the most maligned thing, particularly in the middle-aged women and older space, they're like, oh, you can't do that. You can only do super high intensity cardio. And there's nothing wrong with super high intensity cardio. There's nothing wrong with HIIT. But if you prefer endurance cardio, if that's your thing, if that's what gets you moving, well, I mean, technically it lowers cortisol levels for the rest of the day better than anything else that we possibly have. But we're only going to show you those 2 hours out because we want to scare you and we want to sell you supplements and training and a book. And it's ironic to say this, and I always point this out, but it's ironic to say, hey, we want to sell you a podcast episode where we're just going to tell you, look what happens in this time frame. But if you don't mention what happens in the later time frames, you don't know that this is something that is actually going to be beneficial long term. And this is what really bothers me about the health space these days. I think people deserve to have all of the nuance. And like you said, there's always it depends. Is this going to spike my cortisol? And is it going to elevate my cortisol? Yeah, for about 2 hours. Is this a bad thing? Is cortisol always bad? In some circumstances, it's not good. I mean, if you are suffering from issues with actual organs where your cortisol production is way too high for too long, it's a problem. Are you suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder? Yeah, it can be a problem. I mean, that's a real issue. Is there an issue with, a husband dies or you're going through a divorce? Absolutely. And it's not necessarily cortisol that's the biggest problem, although it is an additional problem. But think about everything that comes along with these things. I mean, people will say stress and then they'll say, okay, well, it's the cortisol that's the real problem. And then you look at it and you're like, well, I'm also not sleeping well because of the stress. I'm
It's
also
all the
not
other
eating as
things. Yeah.
yeah, I'm also not eating as well as I was because of the stress. I'm not doing as well. I might be going to the gym, but I'm kind of phoning it in because I don't feel great.
And
And
also how we're handling, right? I always like
mhm,
to rephrase it and just not blame stress, the word, but like, how are you handling the stressors that are facing you?
yeah, I mean, all of these things add together. And so certainly cortisol is not helping under these conditions, particularly if it's putting you into a calorie surplus, which tends to happen. I mean, if you're constantly stressed, you're dealing with work, you're dealing with a relationship, you're dealing with your social life, and it's causing real problems, it's going to test your willpower. And there have been enough studies done on it that if you take a person and you put them under enough stress, they're going to choose the fast food much more often. They're going to choose the ultra processed foods much more often because it gives you that 5 minutes of relief and you feel a little bit better. And then when it all ends up, you're like, well, the cortisol is really causing me problems. Well, the cortisol is part of the problem, but it's a feedback loop. And you
Yeah.
staying stressed is feeding the cortisol. And then you eating more is making you stressed. And then you going out for McDonald's constantly is making you stressed. And so all of these things do add
It's that
together.
loop. Yeah.
hmm But we
Could you
don't
could
go
you
ahead.
just I just wanna tease out a little bit, like, so cortisol rises during exercise,
Mhm.
right? How is that a beneficial part of the process? Just to unpack that a little bit for the people that are listening,
It
because all we hear
mobilizes
about is how negative it is. How
it
is that a
mobilizes the
positive?
stored energy. I mean, this is exactly what you need. You have to have this happen for your body to have the energy to actually work out. It's what allows you to use skeletal muscle glycogen, the glucose, and the fatty acids that are stored in your fat tissues. And we always talk about fat burn as people look at, well, what is the fat burn rate of this exercise or this exercise? Fat burn doesn't technically tell you exactly whether or not you're going to lose fat, but it's a necessary step in it happening. And it doesn't tell you exactly that you're going to lose fat because those calories in, calories out still matter. So even if you're burning a lot of fat, but you're pulling in way more calories that counterbalances that fat burn, you'll still gain fat. But when you're in that calorie deficit that we were talking about, and if your goal is to lose body fat, like so many people's goals are, you need to create those two conditions. You need to liberate the fatty acids from adipose tissue, from your fat tissue, and you need to be in that calorie deficit so your body doesn't say, okay, well, I've used all this energy from my fat. If I've got excess energy, I'm going to put it right back in there. And it's not like it's replacing the exact same fat cells, but just to keep things
It's
a
a
little bit,
process.
yeah,
Mhm.
just to keep things a little bit more understandable. If you have those calories, it's going to say, okay, well, if I've got excess, I got to put it somewhere. And so putting it right back into fat might be a beneficial way for it to store it. It might be a way that makes sense for the body and say, okay, well, I've got this. Because keep in mind, our bodies still think that we're cavemen. It still thinks, hey, you've got to fight for your existence, and having a little bit more body fat is better than having too little body fat. It doesn't realize that we're in the 21st century and that we have calories in excess available all the time. And it's funny, and people can relate to this. It's it almost seems like, man, those hunger signals kick in really quickly when you first go into the calorie deficit, even if you've got a lot of body fat left to lose. It seems like if we're monitoring the changes in metabolic adaptation, those drops in our movement levels, man, that stuff comes on pretty quickly. But in many people, it's almost a unilateral system. And it's because evolutionarily, it didn't really make sense to stop yourself from gaining a bit of body fat. That was a good thing. When you starved because you couldn't catch an antelope later, you had some energy to pull from. So when we go in the reverse, it doesn't seem to work that well. People can eat 1,000 calories above their maintenance without even thinking about it. I mean, your body doesn't say, okay, well, shut this off. In some people, in the rare subset, it does do that. but in most people it doesn't. So we have this evolutionary system in
Great
our
point.
body to prevent us from losing weight, but make us gain weight a little bit. And it's funny because we never really think about it until it's pointed out. And you're like, man, my body kind of throws a little bit of a tantrum the second that I start to lose body fat. And maybe it's not the first week or first 2 weeks, but it does over time. You start to see, okay, I'm feeling a little bit lethargic. I'm really hungry. I'm thinking about food a lot more often. You go in the reverse and it just doesn't happen that way for most people.
For most people, yeah.
Yeah.
So just to drag this out, cortisol spikes induced from exercise, from training, not necessarily a bad thing. In fact, it's part of the process in order for your body to get fueled to do the thing that's demanded of it, right? To meet that stress. Did I say that correct, or would you change that at all?
No, absolutely. I mean, if we want to talk about the best takeaway from this, yes, cortisol is a necessary step in giving yourself the energy to exercise adequately.
Okay. And so, secondly, then, can elevated cortisol directly prevent fat loss if you're in a calorie deficit?
No, not at all. It can't do that. I
It
mean, this
cannot do
this
that.
would be the entire concept of um, this is kind of lumped in with metabolic damage. I mean, people always say, oh, there are these things that your body does. It turns off your metabolism. Cortisol takes over. Insulin takes over. All of these things are blamed for the same thing. But if insulin and cortisol are storage hormones, which they are, but there's nothing to store, what's happening? Well, your body still needs to get energy from somewhere. You can't move without burning energy in some fashion.
Bingo.
You
Yeah.
have to burn the energy either directly from food that you eat, which is the most efficient if you're taking in like fast carbs. I mean, there's a reason that things like Gatorade have sugar in them because it's the easiest thing for your body to say, okay, I don't need to store this at all. I can just take this, convert it, and use it immediately. It either does that or it says, okay, well, I'm not getting enough right now from food because maybe you're training fasted, or maybe you just haven't eaten in a while, or maybe you're not drinking that sugary drink while you're training. And it says, okay, well, I got to get energy from somewhere. First, best case, I'm going to pull from skeletal muscle glycogen because I want to be able to work these muscles. I need them to function and fire. And if I'm in a calorie deficit of substantialness, or a large enough one to be able to require it, I can pull from adipose tissue. And it's also dependent on the type of exercise that you do. And this becomes a little bit confusing for people because we talked about fat burn and fat loss being slightly different things. Slower cardio forms tend to burn more fat and less muscle glycogen, and higher intensity tends to burn more muscle glycogen and less adipose tissue. But that
In the
doesn't
immediate term, yeah.
in the immediate term, but that doesn't change weight loss or weight gain. That's still dictated by calories in, calories
Yes.
out. So don't get confused by that as well, because that's kind of a tangential conversation that people have when they
Exactly.
talk about cortisol. They'll say, okay, well, we want you to do this exercise because it burns the most fat. Sure, it absolutely does.
Did you ever read Lyle MacDonald's book, The Stubborn Fat Loss Solution?
I have, yes. Yeah.
Yeah, I read that a long time ago, and I remember I still have relics of this, cardio stack I would do,
Mhm.
for some gals that were, like, having a trouble spot. It was really, it was the trouble spot at their thighs, and we would do some HIIT, and then we would go into
Followed by,
some.
yep, yep,
Yeah, and then we would do yeah, I don't know if you ever did that, but I
yep.
was I was looking at some old program, and I'm like, "I remember that."
I know exactly what you're talking about, and I remember it, and I remember there was a logical train of thought through each. Like this one liberates some of the adipose tissue. This one causes you to burn some more, like, and it was structured in a way to be able to do that. Now, what's great about that is that probably technically doesn't have to happen in that
That sequence.
sequence
Yeah.
for it to work.
Mhm.
But the theory was good, and it actually works in practice because you're making people move. And if people believe that what they're doing is beneficial and
The
it causes
psychological container, yeah.
yeah, and it causes them to do it more often or with more vigor, it'll actually work. So in practice, that what you were doing, and I actually
I've
did
spoken
that
like a
too.
coach.
Yeah, I mean, you know,
It's spoken like a coach, yeah.
well,
Like, well, if it gets them to do the thing, because like, I don't
yeah,
know about you, but those little things like the ab work, it's like if somebody doesn't do something, it's my ab exercises. And I'm like,
uh-huh.
you
Yeah,
want the abs on
sure.
stage, you have to do this. It is not a negotiable.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. But as a coach, this is where the whole I mean, it's almost a little bit placebo to be able to do it because it's motivational and they believe it's gonna be doing something that it's not technically doing, but it still helps. I don't have a problem as a coach using placebo when there's no negative to it. Um, it's something that they probably should be doing anyways, and I really do think that people really should be doing some high intensity exercise and some endurance exercise each week.
For their
I
fitness.
just believe that there's
Mhm.
benefits to both. Um, and so if we have this lens of, okay, well, we've tried talking it out with them and telling them exactly what's going on and it's not really worked. Well, hey, how about you try it in this sequence because this is a really fun way to do it and it might give you some extra benefits. Okay, I don't have a problem with that. I know that that's a little bit moving away from the strict science rote, definitions of these things. But I
There's
do
probably
think that
behavioral science that we wanna factor in, right? Like
100%. And I think that if we can get people to do what they need to be doing and then see the results that they've been struggling with and then finally be happy and then you build up all
mhm,
those things like the confidence and
yeah.
the less stress in your life. I mean, if they start to see results, their cortisol will lower. I mean, if you want to the funniest thing about cortisol is if you really want to spike your cortisol, worry about cortisol. If you want to not spike your cortisol,
Love it.
learn the benefits of when does cortisol work for you, when does it work against you, under what conditions, and then get rid of that extra stress, focus on what matters, and start progressing.
So let's segue into metabolism because I wanna talk about that, and this is a perfect dovetail into the discussion around metabolism. There's another big myth that keeps floating around, and every now and again, I, as a coach, encounter that with clients. I know they've probably seen some Instagram post, and
Mm.
there's this magical narrative out there that the problem is not that you're not actually in a deficit. The problem is that your metabolism is broken, especially for the midlife woman. So let's talk about that. You recently wrote that your metabolism probably isn't broken. You may not be training as hard as you think, right? You might be inaccurate in tracking your food and also inaccurate with your activity, especially if have you ever seen you probably got those messages, man, my it says I burned 14,000 calories, but I'm only eating 1,500 calories. Like, why am I not losing weight?
How
So I'd love you to
happy
dive in there.
how happy does it make you whenever a client sends you their Whoop or Aura readings and you just have to face palm again? I every time I get sent like those, this is the calories burned, do we need to change up the plan? I'm like, please don't send me these things. And the reason that I say that, I explain it nicely. The reason that I say that is because those calorie trackers, they can be up to 92% off. 92%. And so
That's a
you
huge number.
I mean, you could think that you've burned 300 calories and you could really be burning, 5 yeah, or you could think that you burn sorry, reverse. You could think that you burned 700 calories and you could really only have burned like 400. And so it becomes a real problem to say, okay, well, let's take away calories based off of these readings and I'm doing all of this. And yes, activity adds in. The problem is like even active exercise, like your cardio and your weight training, it's probably a lot less than what you think. It's not incredibly impactful, not unless you're doing things like triathlons, marathons, that kind of stuff. Then it is impactful. I mean, your non-exercise activity, thermogenesis, your random step counts are probably going to do a lot more. So you don't typically have to worry about that calorie burn. Now, when we talk about your original question, particularly in the midlife woman, and I want to talk about this in the midlife woman because I don't see this really being pushed on men. I mean, you can tell me if you have. I don't see men being told your metabolism is what's broken. I just haven't seen that. So I'm gonna address this towards women because I think that this is where we need to talk about this specifically because I think that this is where people are being preyed upon. The average age of menopause is 51. My wife went into it at 39, started. So there's certainly a large range where people can be shifted into this. I wanted to bring that up because when we talk about the metabolic research, we have research in thousands of men and women, even through the menopause transition. What a lot of these people that are pushing this, your metabolism is broken narrative don't take into account is a lot of people feel like if the title of a study doesn't say menopause, then it's somehow not related to menopause or not, worthwhile for women in menopause to take to pay attention to. And we have some really great research looking at the entire life course from ages 18 to 80 and identifying metabolisms. And Pontzer 2020, I believe, or 2021 was like kind of like the seminal work. And it looked at thousands of men and women. And what they found was across the age of 20 to about 63, you'll hear most people say 20 to 60 because it's a more rounded number. About
Yeah.
20 to 60, 20 to 63, we don't see any changes in resting metabolic rate. Now, note what I said there, resting metabolic rate, what your body burns when we don't consider things like your active movement, your thermic effect from food, those different things. It's identical. The changes are identical between men and women. I said ages 20 to 63. If the average age of menopause is 51, we're including most of the women who go through menopause. So if we were to say, well, we know menopause causes a real problem or drop in resting metabolic rate, then it would have been shown in a sample of thousands of women going from
Exactly.
age 20 to 63.
Yeah.
We find in deeper looks into this research, the metabolic rate is changed irrelevant to menopause. It cycles pretty much in line with age, whether you're a man or a woman. You can expect the exact same drops. Looking even more microscopically at menopause transition, there's no differences in the metabolic rate across the transition itself. So it's not like, okay, well, maybe in the first year we see this drop and it just wasn't big enough for us to detect when we look at the long-term thing. No, we don't see any of those changes. Aging, not menopause, drives the decline in energy expenditure. At age 60 or so, we do see drops at about 0.7% per year moving forward. I actually think that it's probably less at this age, this is going to happen, and more what we historically see. Because think
Because of lifestyle.
yes, I suspect, and this is the issue. When we look at samples of thousands of men and women, we're looking at thousands of the average man and woman. We're not looking at thousands of
Yeah.
stage-ready bodybuilders. We're not looking at thousands of women that are into fitness. We're gonna
Coached athletes,
We're not
people that
looking
are
at coached
coached
athletes.
and yeah.
We're gonna catch some of them in that sample, but the majority of women, just like the majority of men, don't exercise enough. They don't lift weights. They don't eat
And by
right.
the time they're in their mid-60s, forget about it, right?
Right. And so is it surprising to anybody that when we look at a sample of thousands of men and women who probably don't exercise, who probably don't watch what they eat very well, and their metabolism starts to dip? And so this becomes very interesting. So it says, okay, well, what happens if we start to look at body compositions? When we look at menopause, the data suggests that it doesn't even accelerate muscle loss. And I know people love to point out, oh my God, during the menopause transition, there's this one study that shows double the rate of muscle loss. Yes,
I remember that study,
the
yeah.
Swan study shows that. And I have seen researchers point this out to make women scared. Your muscle loss is going to double through this period. Okay, well, what does that mean? So I did a research breakdown with Alan Aragon on this. And one of the things that we found was over the entire menopause transition, it was less than half a pound of muscle. And that was under double the rate of loss.
It's the magic of percentages and
Yeah.
all that, right?
So
Like, if
yes,
it's
it
like
is.
100% of 0 is still 0.
Yes, it is double the rate of loss, but we're not losing very much. So what's really reassuring is that the rules for fat loss and muscle building, they don't change when you're peri or postmenopausal. Major hormonal shifts do happen. We don't see differences regarding fat mass or lean mass, regardless of menopause status, as long as age is taken into account. And when we standardize that data for lean muscle, there's no difference in resting metabolic rate, even through menopause. But that's the important thing. We have to standardize it for lean muscle. And so the people that are listening to this podcast, you have a leg up on all the other women in your life because you're doing the things that will prevent you from becoming one of these statistics. Reductions in the resting metabolic rate are due to the loss of lean muscle from aging and being sedentary, and changes in the total calorie burn that we see across this transition due to decreased activity. But the cool thing about this is resistance training has been shown to prevent these declines despite the changes in hormones. I don't want to sound crass because just like we were talking about in the preamble, hearing some of this stuff from a man is oftentimes very jarring for a lot of women. There, the Swan study, the same one that showed that double the loss of lean muscle or lean mass across the menopause transition, also found that there was no change in BMI, which means across the entire menopause transition, I mean, they monitored years for these women, they didn't see massive body fat gain. But the experience is very different. And there are a few things that we do need to be honest and open about, because saying, oh, you're not going to gain a whole lot of body fat and you're not going to lose a whole lot of muscle sounds great when you're the ones experiencing this and you're saying, I feel very different and I'm doing the exact same things. You're probably not doing the exact same things. And that's a hard thing to understand, but the experience is very different. Vasomotor symptoms are a bitch. You are not sleeping well. You're having hot flashes. You're having issues with memory, brain fog. There's all these different things that add in. And then we start to look at, okay, well, what are the actual practices that are being changed? And what are people noticing? Well, when we look at research that looks at all of this, we're seeing protein dip majorly. And it's really low to begin with. I mean, how many people have you seen, Michelle, where you first start working with them and you're like, okay, well, we're going to revamp this person's diet. And you're like, oh shit, they're getting 50 grams of protein per day. I mean, I see that all the time,
Yeah, me
particularly
too.
in this population that we're talking about. You see that all the time. I mean, men, you get a little bit more protein just naturally because men are, I don't know if there's a macho thing with wanting to eat more.
Conditioned to eat more. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that might be the place, whereas women historically have been conditioned, oh, you should probably eat that salad. And then there's never a mention of, could you put some chicken on it or could you put some shrimp on? That was never
Yeah.
the messaging that was given. So we see protein really dip through the menopause transition. We see fiber really dip through the menopause transition. We see a lot more saturated fat replace polyunsaturated fats. So we're seeing these changes to diet. We're seeing less movement. We're seeing less sleep. And sleep is a big thing. Sleep itself doesn't cause you to gain body fat, but sleep is certainly associated with body fat gain because it's just like stress. You are causing issues with your willpower. You're much more likely to reach for fast foods. You're much more likely to reach for nutrient devoid food options. And so, yes, things do change. Activity lowers because you're more tired. So you're not working out as effectively. You're not those step counts that we're talking about. You're not moving as much. You're staying more on the couch. So things do change. When you do gain body fat, yes, it is more centrally located. That's a change that comes with the hormones, but you still have to be in that calorie surplus for that to happen. You don't just build body fat around your midsection just because. You build body fat around your midsection because you're in a calorie surplus. And now all of a sudden, because of the changes, because of the menopause transition, you're distributing fat differently. And that becomes an almost self-fulfilling prophecy for a lot of women. I'm told that I'm going to be building a lot more body fat. Holy crap, my gut is much bigger than it's ever been before. You're not building more body fat. Less of it went to your legs, less of it went to your butt. More of it's,
Potentially.
yeah, more potentially, yeah.
Potentially,
Yeah.
because what I see as a coach that looks at numbers all day, I'm like, I don't like nothing. Where's this? Well, especially doing builds, right?
Mhm.
We do lean builds and we track everything. And my gals that always gain at their hips and thighs, that's the metric that goes up.
Mhm.
I'm not seeing anything unusual happening. And I coach gals for 5, 6, 7 years. So I'm seeing them through the menopause transition to the other side. And it's like, and then I've got my own N=1 where I'm just like, nope, that's not where I gain weight. I never have gained weight there. I'm fully menopausal.
Your N=1 is very similar to mine, N=1, but remember, we're working with a population with when they're working with us, they're actually lifting well. They're actually
Tracking.
eating more
Yep.
protein. They're actually tracking. And so when we talk about this shift in body fat distribution to the stomach, I mean, we're talking about a general, if you're going to gain fat and you're in that position where you've got more cortisol, you've got more insulin,
And you're not
um,
doing all these other things.
you're
You're
not
not
doing
in
all
the
these other
system.
things.
Right.
Yes, you're
Yeah.
not doing the things that will help prevent this. And that's why we're stressing this. We're not pointing these things out to say, "Oh my God, this is doom and gloom." We're pointing these things out to say, "You have control over these
There's
situations."
a
And
way through.
yes, and we really
Yes,
want you to take
bingo.
care of it. This is not your experience is invalid. You gained body fat
Exactly.
because you're dumb or you're
Shame on
wrong or you're
you.
bad.
Yeah,
No, none of that's true.
exactly.
What's wrong is when an influencer tells
The
you that
messaging.
you're going to gain body fat, you have to buy my stuff to prevent it. No, no,
My
no.
stack. Yeah.
You need to be doing the same thing that you should have been doing beforehand. It's disagree with me if you want to, Michelle, Most women should be lifting more weights before the menopause transition. Most women should be. Most men should be. Most men give up
Most men
lifting weights.
and women
Most
should
men give up
be,
lifting
yeah.
weights in their 30s, but at least men had started lifting weights in their teens and their 20s, which at least these days is starting to become a more common thing with women. It's great. I love the mental shift society has had to supporting women that have athletic bodies. You have not been supported historically in that aspect. And so many women have been like, okay, well, all I can do is run, or all I can do is ballet or dance. Like, I see a lot of women who say, I want to do dance as my exercise. And I'm like, can you lift some weights too? You can do the dance. Can you do some weights too? Because of how important it becomes throughout the
Very
entire
important.
lifespan. I mean, one of the other
Yeah.
changes that happens during this menopause transition is you become much more susceptible to bone loss, to osteoporosis. That's an absolute fact. But you don't have to be doomed into getting osteopenia or osteoporosis. If you lift weights, you'll prevent that. So when we look at this data in these large samples of women, it's a lot less doom and gloom than what we think. And it's a lot less doom and gloom because when we start to add in these things, we start to add in resistance training, we prevent these declines. And I suspect that we would prevent these declines beyond 60 if we just kept it up. So yes, this is really problematic. And then on top of that, one of the things that you had mentioned before, are people tracking? Are people tracking accurately when they do track? When we look at the research on that, the average person is off by about 500 calories per day
At least.
from what they think. Obese people, and this is where it's really like a punch in the gut. If you're obese or have obesity, there's probably some other factors in play that can lead to that. And one of them is tracking errors are probably a bit more because you may have the best intentions and you may be doing everything that you think is right. But we've seen people that have obesity to be off by 1,100 calories.
Wow, that's a
More than
big number.
more than double. Now that's the larger examples, but it's probably a decent logical leap to say, okay, well, if obesity is in play and you are tracking and you're still struggling, well, there's probably more error in play. I mean, that's
Yeah, I
what's
was gonna ask you about that. Like, what are the common ways that you think people unintentionally underestimate their calorie intake? Because I know I see it all the time, especially when you've got gals that aren't pre-planning, they're eating and then plugging it in. When I see that pattern, and it's a very obvious pattern when I look at their we use the My Macros tracker, and when I go in and
mm,
look at their, you can tell in a second, was this pre-planned or was this put in after the fact? And
mm.
so could you talk about that one? Like, what's that play there?
All
What are
right.
the common ways people unintentionally underestimate?
First off, what Michelle is hinting at is the exact right recommendation. Please, if you're counting macros, pre-plan 2 or 3 meals for each main meal. Please do that. That all fits by the end of the day. If you combine them all, they all fit into what you're trying to achieve at the end of the day. Reason being, some people will say, "Well, just pre-plan a day." I actually say give like 2 or 3, like give calorie and protein equated 2 or 3 breakfasts, 2 or 3 lunches, 2 or 3 dinners. That way you're not stuck eating the same meal plan every day, but you can pull in, pull out these different meals as you want. That'll give you a little bit of variety, but won't throw you off because you have okay, well, this is what I'm going to be eating for the week. It's great. It works really well that way. So like Michelle was saying, pre-planning makes a lot of sense because if you don't pre-plan, by the end of the day, you're going to have 40 grams of protein left, 1 gram of fat, and 2 grams of carbs. And you're going to be like, great,
Totally.
now I'm going to be drinking liquid egg whites to meet this. And you're going
And
to be
it's not
miserable and you're
sustainable.
going to say dieting doesn't work. And you're going to say, I can't believe Michelle made me count macros. And so like, this is that
I
thing.
hate counting macros. Like, yeah,
Yes.
I said we do not track, we plan.
Right.
And I also see coaches putting people on meal plans. And I'm like, I know why they do that. They do that because they've given up. They're like, let's take the choice out, just follow. Because macros came as a result of bodybuilders being put on these tilapia and rice, forever
Mhm.
and ever, these diets. And it's like, well, do we have to? Like, what are the macros? Can we just eat the macros? But it's gone in the wrong direction.
I think meal plans can be worked very, very well successfully if you do it right. I think that the old bodybuilder meal plans of like, here's 9 ounces of chicken, here's some broccoli, and here's some brown rice, which is what every meal used to be. Here's chicken
Did you ever
breast.
do that? I've never been
Did
on a
I
meal
in the
plan like that.
90s? Yes, absolutely. Because I'm old and I was a man in the 90s, and that was how everybody did it at the time. Like if you got any coach in the 90s, it's like you can eat sweet potatoes, you can eat brown rice, you can eat chicken, you can eat tilapia, and you can eat egg whites and broccoli or asparagus. And so, I mean, It was a horrible, horrible time, and I completely agree. Those meal plans are pretty awful. You can make meal plans better these days. I don't think a whole lot of people do because they resort to macros, and macros are fine. I mean, it's just two different ways that you can do it. Pre-planning some meals in a way that makes the meal plans viable can work. But to your point, what are the errors that people are making that are very, very common? Because there are some, and I'm going to give you a list. And hopefully this list can be what people take home and really, really get some benefit from. First off, people have to understand that raw and cooked measures are different things.
Yeah.
99% of people do not realize that raw and cooked measures are different things. If you take a chicken breast, it's raw. On the package, if you are looking at nutrition information on a package, just assume it's raw unless it says otherwise. On the package, it's going to give you what the raw chicken breast is per number of grams or ounces or whatever you're looking at. Let's say that you've got that chicken breast and it's 100 ounces, or sorry, 100 grams, and it's a certain number of protein, carbs, fat grams per that 100 gram of chicken breast. Well, if you cook it, it's going to change weight, but those protein grams, carb grams, and fat grams aren't going to change. You're still going to get that many grams of protein. I mean, roughly, there's a little bit of change, but you're still going to get that many grams of protein, that many grams of carbs, that many grams of fat. But if you are meal prepping or bulk prepping for a week and you've taken that weight and you're like, okay, well, I've got the information. That information is going to be wrong if you're reheating cooked food or if you're for some reason weighing after you cook. Because that cooked food on a grill, on a skillet, whatever it is going to be lighter because you've burned away some of the
Water.
moisture that was in the
Yeah.
food. So it's going to weigh less, but it's going to have the same calories at a lower weight. So if you were using that original raw weight for the cooked item, you're going to be getting more calories. You're going to be getting more protein, more fat,
Yeah.
more carbs than what you thought you were getting.
Um,
And so people will make this mistake with a large variety of different foods and they won't realize that, okay, maybe this is adding to that 500 calorie error that we are having in our common daily issues. And 500 is average, remember? So there are going to be people that have significantly higher. So you have to be conscious of, am I using raw or am I using cooked?
so that's a good one. Raw versus cooked. Brilliant.
Raw is more accurate. You can make some adjustments for cooked. Like let's say that you are bulk prepping a bunch of chicken. You take a total weight of the chicken. You're like, I've got 6 chicken breasts. They're 600 grams. You cook them all. You've got the macros for that 600 grams. You weigh them after they're cooked. They're now 500 grams. You now distribute those macros over those 500 grams. And that's your chicken for the week. And there you go. I mean, you can break it down to what it is per gram. I usually tell people just say, okay, well, I'm going to eat all 6 of these chicken breasts during this week. So by the end of the week, if I just know the total macros, it'll be fine. You can do it by the day. That's where you break it down into, okay, well, what is this per gram or per ounce or whatever it is?
I just we have at the Wonder Woman we have like cooked and raw for everything, and then the caveat with certain things, right? So like roasted vegetables, it's like roasted for 40 minutes or roasted for 2 hours because the more you roast it, the more concentrated you make
Right,
everything. And the same thing with meat, right? Like
right.
not well done. We're talking about a little bit of pink inside if it's red meat or something. We're not like turning into a hockey puck
If you're choosing
because
well
then
done,
it's
you're
more
making a mistake to begin
yeah.
with. But no, you're right. And
Point taken.
I give some in cooked measurements as well. There is a bit of
I just want
error.
to take the math out
Yeah,
as much as I can.
there's a little bit of error when we do that, and coaches realize this.
Of
There's a little bit of
course.
error when we do
Yeah.
that. But if you're choosing from a subset of a small variety of different foods, you're probably choosing, chicken breast often. You're probably choosing these things often. Any of those errors are going to work their way out as you adjust the program moving forward. And
Exactly.
a good coach can do that.
Yeah. Have you seen I see this popping up every now and again, and this is actually in some verified food data, and that's another topic, right? Like I was just telling a gal, it's up to 20% legally that
Mhm.
you're allowed to screw up with the food data, and then we only find out about it if somebody blows the whistle, and it's expensive to blow the whistle and do
Mhm.
a study, and then that's what happened to Quest, right? Right, Quest bars back in the day, where you're
Yep.
saying like there's almost
The
no
fiber.
carbs, and then yeah. So have you seen? I've seen chicken with no fat, right? Chicken breast, 100 grams of chicken breast, 0 fat. And I'm like, what
That's
the heck?
unlikely.
And then they're putting oil in because they're like, And of course, chicken's a favorite in a meal plan. People are eating a
Sure.
lot of chicken, and so
Yeah.
they're like 50 grams of fat throughout the week are missing.
Yeah.
Have you seen that?
Yes, absolutely. Well, people have to understand there's a reason we have to allow some form of error. We have to.
Yeah.
The reason that we have to allow some form of error is because the chicken breast from chicken A is not going to have the same composition as the chicken breast from chicken B. It's just, they're not the same. There's going to be variance in protein. There's going to be variance in fat. It's impossible to say this chicken breast that's right in front of you is this many grams of protein, this many, unless you test that chicken breast on the spot. You cannot tell that. So we do have to have some room for error in the labeling because there's going to be error, and that's just the way that it is. It's when it's beyond that it becomes a real issue. Quest was a good example that they were claiming fiber that didn't function as fiber, and some of those issues. But you have to realize that there is some of that error in play, but it all gets worked out if you continue with a rather stable nutrition training regimen, step count. You can make adjustments because whether you're at 1,500 calories to lose body fat or whether it takes you to be at 1,400 calories to lose body fat, if over time we're slowly making adjustments, we'll get into that range. And you could think, okay, well, it says that I'm at 1,200 calories, but remember, and this is what I always find really funny. People are like, oh, well, if you get to 1,200 calories, you're too low. I'm like, but if we look at standard error, they could be at 1,700. And so everybody's like, I got to stop at 1,200, but you're not losing weight at that 1,200. So like there's either you're a smaller person, you have a slightly slower metabolism than someone else. Maybe you move a lot less. Maybe you've got error in play. And so a lot of times you do have to make those adjustments, but a good coach can help in two instances. One, they can keep you on track saying, okay, well, these adjustments are being made for a reason. Two, they can audit your logs. And I do spot checks. The first few times people
too.
check in with me, I do very distinct, like I'm going to really pay attention to every little entry and where is this person making the mistakes. And then as they become more competent in what they're doing, I'll do spot checks. Every now and then I'll be like, okay, well, when they check in, I'm going to check 2 or 3 food items.
I generally don't check the day of the check-in. Do you do that? I always go back.
I do the day of the check-in. But we might have different ways that we do our check-ins.
Yeah.
So I have people check in.
Because I find the day that they do the check-in, my clients that are struggling a little bit more with self-auditing, that one day will be perfect. But if I go back 2 days, that's where I'll see
No, yes.
That's what I mean. Yeah.
Yes. I do it the day of the check-in, but I look at, so I'll go back through, I do check-ins every 2 weeks. And I will look back over the 2 weeks. I've got a general idea of where most foods are just from having done this for long enough that I'll look at their things and I'll be like, okay, well, that many grams of chicken, that's a questionable number that they're getting for their output, or what the total calorie is. So then I'll run it through my information and I'll check that and I'll be like, okay, well, this one might be off. And if it's off by like 10 or 15 calories, I'm not going to say anything. I'll just be like, okay, good. Let them go. But I do spot checks and and that's one of the things that coaches like Michelle will do, like I will do, because it removes a lot of that error that you've been making over time that, makes you think, okay, well, I'm at 1,100 calories and I can't be this low. Therefore I need to add calories back in, because if I add calories back in, then I'll surely lose weight. It does not work that way.
I know.
There's only one condition where adding calories in causes people to lose weight. If adding calories in causes a larger swing in NEAT in the other direction, in your step count, in your movement in the other direction. So say you're only burning, 200 calories from movement throughout the day, and then you add in 300 calories of food, but then you start burning 300 calories above that, then yes, you're going to lose weight. Adding calories in is not going to rev up your metabolism, your resting metabolic rate. It doesn't do that. And the reverse diet crowd has really pushed, we need to add reverse diets in to rev up hormones and rev up metabolism. And it just doesn't do that.
Yeah, we've done the research. Yeah, so much research.
And so
I think as a coach, Jay and I discussed this, what we see is oftentimes, again, it's behavioral.
What do you mean by that?
When we increase, if we have somebody who's struggling.
I'm interviewing you now, by the way.
Yeah, and we don't change the deficit. I mean, we increasing the deficit, nothing's happening. It's like, okay, it's like there's 400 calories taken off the plate. What's happening here?
And
If
nothing
we
changes. Yeah.
add
Yeah.
calories back in, their adherence improves, and then they
Yeah.
start to lose.
Yeah.
I mean, you must
Well,
see that, you and Beth.
Well, it's funny that and that 100% happens a lot of the time, but we have to be honest with ourselves about what's happening when we say, "Okay, you're at 1,200 calories and it's not working." Well, if they're not actually eating 1,200 calories, then they're not at 1,200 calories. Like, it might be set at 1,200 calories, but they might be eating 1,800 calories. Then you can't say 1,200 calories doesn't work. And I think that's where people get really caught up. They'll say, "Well, 1,200 calories, I couldn't lose weight on it and I was in a calorie deficit." But you weren't in a calorie deficit. That's why you weren't losing weight. And this is not to be mean.
Which is hard to hear.
If you're not losing weight over an extended period of time, yes, there are short-term changes where you won't lose weight because of water weight shifts, because of food shifts, all those different kinds of things. I mean, take
Mhm.
more sodium in
Perfect.
for one day and for 48 hours, you're bloated a little bit. Sure, you're not going to lose weight. If we're looking at 2, 4, 6 week periods and you're not losing weight on something that you swear is a calorie deficit, you're not in a calorie deficit. And it's either because your calories aren't set too low, you stopped moving, you are tracking incorrectly. There's something wrong. And that doesn't mean there's something wrong with your practices, rather. That doesn't mean that you were a bad person. That means the math isn't working. And if the math's not working, there's a reason why. So let's figure it out. And if one of the reasons is what Michelle said, if the answer is, well, we've got it at 1,200 calories, but she's eating 1,800 every time. And if we raise it to 1,500 calories and then she actually eats 1,500 calories,
Boom. Yeah, bingo.
solved it right there. But then the 1,500 calories are working. That's a calorie deficit. You are in a calorie deficit. If 1,500 calories works, 1,200 calories will definitely work.
So what are three, and I know I want to tie this off. So what are three things?
I
Good
laugh
luck. We're
because
gonna be another half an
I
hour.
laugh because of the 5-minute segments that you gave.
I know. Well, it was a little bit tongue in cheek, Alan.
Yeah.
So what are three things? Because you not only are you a great researcher and you're deep at this and you've collaborated with some absolute legends in the industry. What are some, and you're a phenomenal coach, right? You and your wife. What are three things, the miraculous three things that you think right off the top, people that are listening to us, and I'm, not the people that are freaking doing all the things, it's the people that are struggling. I want to give them some takeaways. What are three things that you highly recommend that they do in terms of auditing I call it their system, right? Their lifestyle, their system, their routines. What are three things in your experience where you've seen some great success with people that were struggling to lose that body fat? When they do these three things, it really, you're like, bingo, now we're seeing some progress.
The first thing that I want to challenge people to do is take at least 2 weeks to, if you look up macros, if you look up calorie counts, take at least 2 weeks at some point in your journey, maybe 4, be 100% on plan. You cannot know if that calorie amount is appropriate for you if you are not 100% on plan. And I say that because I have had, and you can talk to this too if you've experienced the same thing. I have had some people that have worked with me for longer periods of time, and they're consistently sitting at like 65, 70% adherence over biweekly periods. And they're like, well, my calorie deficit doesn't work. I'm like, well, why don't we try a 2-week period? Just challenge yourself. Find it when there's not a holiday in play. Find it when there's not an anniversary in play and say, I'm going to be 100%. And I say this, it seems almost stupid to bring this up, but I say this because if you do that and you're tracking correctly and you've chosen an appropriate amount, you're going to prove to yourself that a calorie deficit works. I promise you, it will prove to you that it works, which is a great thing because then from then on, you can look at each biweekly period or weekly period, however you do check-ins or however you do when you come back together and say, okay, well, is this working? I think a week is a little bit too soon. I would give it 2-4 weeks to tell, particularly in women of menstruation age, because you're going to have those shifts with your phases and that's going to mess with your perception of is this really causing the weight loss that I'm looking for? Look at that critically. If you prove to yourself that this calorie deficit works, you can stop being afraid of cortisol. You can stop being afraid of insulin. You can stop being afraid of zone 2 cardio. You can stop being afraid of all of these things that people are preaching you should be afraid of. And you can realize, okay, well, this works. It also allows you to be more comfortable in those biweekly periods or single weekly periods where you're like, well, I've got a holiday coming up. I've got an event coming up. I might gain some weight, during this period. It might be transient. It might be a little water weight. It might be a little bit of muscle glycogen. It might be a little bit of body fat, but I know that the plan works. I know that what I'm doing works. And so I can be comfortable after this event to get back on track in a more stress-free manner. I think that it makes your life so much easier to be able to look at this and say, hey, I know that this works. If I put in the effort, I'm going to be rewarded. And I will say that all the time. I've had clients that have lost 60, 70, 80 pounds of body fat, and they will have been on a great clip for many, many months. And then something throws them off, because something's going to throw you off. There is never a time there's never a person that doesn't run into something, and it throws them off, and they're off of their plan for 2, 4 weeks or whatever it is. And they come back and they're like, I'm really struggling to get back on track. And I will have this exact conversation with them. And I'll be like, remember when you were 100% on the plan and it absolutely worked? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, think of all of the other people that haven't worked with a coach, that haven't seen this happen in the situation that you're in. They will feel like they don't have a life raft to grab onto. You have the exact plan that you need. Get back on track. You know that if you do this, there's going to be some inertia to start, and then you're going to be fine. That leads into the second
Brilliant.
thing that I would tell people. Motivation isn't necessary to succeed. You have to have, I don't want to say commitment, because commitment is a little bit too mercurial. You have to have a why of why you're doing something. Motivation isn't necessary to succeed, because motivation is going to ebb and flow. Yes, you're going to need a little bit. You have to have some sort of motivation to do something. But people need to realize that motivation is the result of action, not the cause of it. If you're always waiting for that moment to be optimally motivated, you're going to be waiting forever. That I'll start Monday mentality throws more people off from achieving their goals than anything else that I've ever seen. There is always a lot of inertia when you first start something new, particularly if you don't feel competent. If you don't feel like you know exactly what you're doing, it makes taking that first step very difficult. But the way that things work is you figure out, okay, well, what is the easiest barrier to entry for me? And then I'll do that. Maybe it's, okay, I'm just going to start monitoring my steps. You're not even trying to get a certain step count, but you're just going to start monitoring it. Maybe it's, I'm going to put my gym clothes out and gym shoes out at the base of my bed so I work out in the morning. Maybe it's, I'm going to pack my gym bag and just throw that gym bag with my stuff in my car so I can go after work. Anything to get started is the right move, because that will compound. Motivation is really interesting. It's like a snowball rolling down a hill. The more that you do, the more that builds, and then it eventually becomes on autopilot. But you have to get started for that to really work. And then lastly, and you had talked about the original question was, for people that are trying to succeed at fat loss, but I actually want to change direction just a little bit for the last one. I think that people need to realize that when we're talking about the fitness side of things, when you first start out, pretty much anything works. If you go from doing absolutely nothing to going into the gym and, lifting 3 sets of 8 in your bicep curls or your bench press or your squat or whatever it is, you're going to see decent progress for 6, 8, 12 months. And then it's going to plateau. I see so many people get stuck in that plateau, and then it demotivates them because you're not moving the way that you thought that you should be moving. Realize that in the beginning, particularly in fitness, you're going to have a newbie gains period where you're going to progress faster and better than you're ever going to progress in the future. Most likely, if you've got your other practices down. Once you're beyond that newbie gains period, intensity becomes the name of the game. You have to create
Thank you.
mechanical tension to build lean muscle, to improve your body, to get that body composition that you want. And this is something that Michelle and I talk with clients about all the time. In our minds, we'll look at that female fitness influencer online and we'll say, I want a body exactly like hers. And the thought process to get there is, she's lean, I need to lose body fat. Yeah, that's part of the equation. But maybe even a bigger part of the equation is that she actually built lean muscle. And it, one, makes that entire journey more productive. But two, it's actually what gives you that visual look that you're going for, that athletic look, that performance that you're looking for, that health that you're looking for. I mean, it does building muscle and strength does everything in your life. I mean, we talk about injury resistance. If I would ask a random person on the street, what should you do to prevent injury? People would tell me that they should stretch. Stretching reduces injury risk 0 to 4%, virtually nothing. Strength training up to 69%. If we talk about Deborah from the cul-de-sac, she's your friend. She looks pretty ripped, but you see her having a pizza when you go out. Well, that extra muscle acts as a metabolic sink. It pulls a lot of that glucose in there. It doesn't have to store it as body fat. She's got more muscle to store. And if you start training more intensely, your body upregulates its stores of skeletal muscle glycogen. You've got a bigger bank to put that in because your body says this is being used. If you don't exercise a lot, your body gets rid of that extra store. Yes, it's going to store some, but it's not going to store as much as it can because it doesn't need it because you're not using it. And so intensity in training becomes a really big thing. It gives you all of these benefits that come with building muscle. It reduces injury risk. It prolongs your life. It doesn't just add years to your life. It adds life to your years. It acts as a metabolic sink. It does everything that we always
Does
talk
all those
about.
things. Yeah.
Yet people will always give this a lesser importance than just going into a diet and losing body fat. And I think that
100%.
if losing body fat is your ultimate goal, the large majority of women probably have some body fat to lose. But outside of that initial, okay, this is going to make me feel a little bit better, you probably
need
should
to
spend a
gain
year or
muscle.
two building muscle,
Yeah.
a year or two
Mhm.
building muscle. I'm not saying
Yeah.
you go into a build
A
where
build,
you
a dirty
gain
bulk.
where you
Yeah.
gain 2 pounds over 4 months and
A
you say,
month.
okay, I've done it. The problem that I see all the time is that we don't appreciate enough, both men and women don't appreciate enough building the muscle. We're always trying to get to our goal by dieting. And it's weird. What ends up happening, if you don't have enough muscle, you almost always kind of look like a smaller version of that kind of doughy self. I mean, that's what skinny fat is. If you don't build the muscle to be able to display it, you don't have enough muscle to display. That toned look, that tighter look comes from having the muscle to display. And what's also great about that is even at higher body fat percentages, you'll look better because you'll have a little bit more muscle to display. So that third thing that I would really emphasize to people is be patient and actually put some effort into building that muscle because that's what is the thing that really changes people's lives. I mean, that's the thing that gives you the health that you're looking for and gives you the body that you're looking for. And back to exactly what we talked about in the very beginning, if you're constantly trying to do the things that you've done in the past that hasn't worked, it's probably time to try something different and actually succeed because
And change your
those things
approach.
that you've
Yeah.
been, yes, absolutely. Those things that you've been afraid to try because they don't give you that immediate gratification. I mean, let's be honest, cutting body fat is great. When you cut body fat, you can see changes on the scale every week or 2 or 3. When you're building lean muscle, it takes months to really
It's
see
like walking
significant
paint
changes.
dry.
Yeah, it absolutely
That's
is
how
like
I say it. It's like
Mhm.
taking a teaspoon of oil and just spreading it over your entire body every week. A tablespoon,
Mhm.
right? And like you're not going to see it. You're going to see it in after several months.
It's very, very slow. It's much slower than what we hope. So what do? You switch your
Oh
sign of
no,
success.
I started on another.
Okay, one really quick thing.
One quick thing, Alan.
You switch your sign of success
Yeah.
from watching the scale drop and seeing those distinct improvements in the mirror that you can see in a fat loss phase to improvements in performance. If you
I do
are
the same thing. Yeah.
if you are getting stronger, if you are performing better over time, the lean muscle is coming.
Change a
That's the
different
sign
number.
that it's working.
Yeah.
Stop focusing on the mirror, start focusing on your performance. That's how you make it sustainable.
I love it. All right, I'm going to try to sum this up.
All right.
This is a test for my attention. So number one, cortisol is not the enemy, right? It actually is very beneficial. It's a necessary part of like weight training. And if you're in a deficit, an elevation, a spike in cortisol is not going to prevent you from losing fat. So that's the one first takeaway point. I think the second one about, is your metabolism broken? Well, you're probably not in the deficit that you think you're in, right? And I think there's a lot of research behind that showing the mistakes people make in self-auditing their food, how much calories they're burning when they're using like a Whoop watch or even, like the step count on the Stairmaster. So that's the second piece really. And there's again, also through the age, the aging profile until you're even in your 60s. And even then it's not a significant number. We're not
Mhm.
seeing these declines in BMI that we're hearing touted about by these, wellness influencers that are trying to get you to buy their mushroom tea or their exotic hormone stack. And then, then the third takeaway, well, there's three of them really, right? If you're struggling, number one, right? Nail whatever your protocol is, right? If your coach gave you something, nail it 100% for 2 weeks and see if when you track and you do all the things properly the way you're supposed to, if you execute the plan, can you actually start losing some weight? Two, have a good why, right? Just
Mhm.
don't do it for any reason. Like really have that why, because when you do fall off track, which is normal, it's going to pull you back in and do the things that you need to do. And then the third thing is double down on intensity. After those newbie gains are gone, right? You got to show up and start pushing hard, chase some different numbers, like maybe the numbers on the bar or how much your work capacity improves or your VO2 match or something, but chase different numbers and make sure the intensity is there because now the game is building muscle mass. I hope I got it right.
I'm actually surprised that you did. Like, that was- I mean, the issue with me talking is that I kind of go off on tangents for a while
I
because I
love
think,
it.
okay, well, with this topic, they need to know this to really get the benefit out of it. And so, like, I kind of go off on like these little side paths, which is why I laughed. And I know that you were joking. Michelle sent me like the show notes. She's like, we're gonna talk about this. And she's like, 5 minutes on this, 5 minutes on this. I laughed because the last time that we had our podcast, she was like, shut up. Like, stop talking. Um,
Never. I
but
love it.
but you bring up so many good topics and yeah, I mean, I hope this really helps some people out.
Oh, for sure it will. And I always send people your way. You put out great content. So does your wife. It's just absolutely brilliant. And it's no BS, right? I mean, you guys are phenomenal coaches. You yourselves maintain an incredibly fit lifestyle, and I think do a fabulous job on turning the volume down on so much of the disinformation and predatory marketing we're seeing, especially in the menno space. I'm so glad to have you on and send people your way. And I hope this episode will help a lot of people.
Well, thank you for having me on, Michelle. It's always fun.
Thanks, Alan.
Bye.